Ever since I heard Joe Pass play walking bass and chords behind Ella Fitzgerald, I was completely sold and found it to be the ultimate way to comp in a duo. Something that I then also spent a lot of time practicing and later putting to use on gigs. Comping like that with several layers happening at the same time can be a bit tricky. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to develop it, what to pay attention to, and how to practice this type of playing, and then also take it one step further. My name is Jens Larsen, learn jazz, make music. The best place to start is by first constructing a bass line and then add chords under it. The way I learned this was actually by transcribing walking bass off albums, but you can actually construct them pretty easily using a few guidelines. Now, before the comment section gets flooded with angry bass players again, then I just want to add that I am aware that playing bass is a profession, maybe even an art form, and that this is just a really simple example that happens to work on guitar. When you play walking bass lines on the guitar, then you are only using the lowest strings, E and A, which is also going to make it easier to add chords later, since this is where you generally place bass notes when you play Shell-Voicings or drop 3 or drop 2 voicings. And you have plenty of strings to add the chord while you're playing the bass lines. For this video, I'm going to use a basic progression just to have a few different things to work with. So I'm using C major 7, E minor 7 to A7, and then D minor 7 to G7, back to C major 7. It's just a slightly embellished 1-6-2-5. Before you start just improvising bass lines, then it's useful to know how to compose them. And that's actually pretty easy to do, since most bass players seem to manage. For now, you can focus on having a walking bass that moves from root note to root note. Let's add those and then use that as a skeleton to construct the rest. So we have these bass notes: C, E, A, D, G, and C. For the bass line to really connect with the chords and be clear, then I have the root note on the first beat, and for the chords that last one bar, I have also put a chord tone on beat 3. So for C, that's the G, for D minor, it's the A, and for G, it's the D. That's an easy way to get a bass line that really sounds like the chord. For the C major 7 bar, here I can easily go from C up to G by just adding the E in between, so just up the triad. And then I need to go to the E on E minor 7, and of course the easiest way to do that is just to walk down the scale and then use an F as a diatonic passing note. Once I'm on the E minor, then I need to go to the A, and the chord tone that's probably the easiest to use there is the B. So you could use the G as well, so you get, but that's a little bit more difficult to play, so I'm not using that one. Then going from the A to the D, then I'm using a C sharp, which is just the third of the chord, to lead up to the D minor. Now D, I need to go down to the A, the fifth, which is on B3, and I do that by just walking down the arpeggio, so down to the C, to A. Now I need to move to G, and instead of playing the A twice, I'm just gonna go down and play, just continue down the arpeggio, so D, C, A, and down to the third, F, and that takes me to the G. On the G, I'm using the triad again, so just G, B, D, and then repeating the B to take me to the C. This gives you this bass line, which I'm just going to play, and then I'm going to show you how you can add some chords to it. Adding chords to a bass line like this is actually pretty simple. I'm going to start with some easy Shell-Voicings and just add them around each chord change. Before we start adding chromatic passing notes and chromatic chords, let's just have a look at what's going on. All I do is that I add the rest of the chord whenever the chord changes. C major 7, E minor 7, to A7, D minor 7, to G7, and back to C major 7. On the G7 you have a delayed chord which adds more syncopation and energy to what's going on, and this is something that you want to explore as well, and that you'll see a lot more of later in the video. As you'll see, then most of the chords in this video are either directly Shell-Voicings or derived from Shell-Voicings. If you want to see how much you can create starting with this easy and basic structure, then check out this video, there's a link in the description. Until now, the bass line was either using chord tones or diatonic notes, but since the point of a walking bass line is to keep the music moving forward, adding some tension with some chromatic passing notes is a great thing to do as well. Let's add that and also some variations to the rhythm. If you like this video, then please also give it a like here on YouTube, because that's a huge help for the video and for the channel. So this is roughly the same bass line, but now there are a few chromatic notes in there as well. I've added the D sharp as an 8th note to lead to the E on E minor 7. So that is both an extra leading note and a more active rhythm. And then in the next bar we have the B flat to take us to A, and the E flat taking us down to D on D minor 7. As you can see, then I add leading notes before the chord change to add some extra forward motion, some extra tension that's then resolved when you get to the root of the next chord. On the D minor 7, then I have the A flat, which is taking us down to the G, so which is actually easier to play and also a chromatic leading note at the same time. So we win twice on that one. The G7 bass line now has a D flat 7 on beat 4. And this is harmonized with a complete D flat 7, which then resolves to the C major 7. What you hear here is that you can in fact also use complete chords as a way of making things move more, be more exciting. So let's add a lot of those and also add some color to the other chords. Here I'm adding notes to most of the chords, giving the dominants 9s and 13s and really just adding color to the sound. I'm also harmonizing some of the leading notes. Now, since the point of a leading note is to create tension that's resolved, then harmonizing it with a dominant chord is often a very good idea. As you can see in the C major 7 bar, where I'm harmonizing the F bass note with an F7 that then resolves to E minor 7, or turning the A flat bass note into an A flat 7 that resolves to G7. The basic principle is really just to harmonize the bass notes, and you can take that even further and then put a chord under all the bass notes, which gives you a harmonized bass line. So I actually forgot to include that I also want to talk about the technique that I'm using. I mean the right hand technique that I'm using, because I play with my fingers. Actually, if you look at the Joe Pass video, I think he's playing with a pick and not with his fingers. He's playing the bass line with a pick. You're gonna do that as well. I kind of prefer the sound of the thumb. I think it just sounds more like a bass. It's softer, but you can do, of course, whatever works for you. So I'm using the thumb for the bass, and then I'm just using the rest of the hand and the rest of the fingers to play the chords with. So that gives you something like this. And actually you also have people who will tell you that you need to palm mute the bass line, but I find that kind of cumbersome, and I really like to just have a little bit more freedom to move around and play the chords. Here you can hear how every bass note is harmonized with a chord, and I'm using inversions and other voicings to connect the whole thing. Most of the time I'm simplifying the chords a little bit because it gets too busy if they're all 4-note chords with a lot of notes and complicated sounds. You can find some great examples of Jim Hall playing like this, and Joe Pass actually also does this in a few places when he's playing with Ella. Often when you do this, you're also using more chromatic passing chords, simply because that's practical instead of changing voicings all the time. But that's of course also a question of tempo. Something I remember struggling with myself when I started out is in fact a common problem for jazz beginners. You think about chords as static grips and don't group together different chord voicings as variations of the same thing, and that makes it impossible to improvise with the chords and get all those beautiful colors that are available. If you want to have a solid foundation to build everything else on and then add variations to that, then check out this video and see just how far you can go with a very simple beginning.